Cardinals GM Steve Keim described the chances of Kyler Murray being traded as such. Zero chance. So, Lewis, maybe that doesn't necessarily end that, but let's talk about the job that the Cardinals, and I suppose Steve Keim, how do you feel he has done from a personnel standpoint in surrounding Kyler Murray with the talent to win?
Yeah, those are interesting comments from Patrick, because, look, when you just look at how they tried to bring in veterans that were still going to be potentially productive as well as being great leaders, you can't argue with the job that Steve tried to do this year. When you bring in guys like Rodney Hudson at center, you bring a guy in like A.J. Green at wide receiver, you bring in guys like James Conner, who had basically a career revival, you bring in a guy like J.J. Watt, who was playing as well as he possibly could play up until the point where he got injured. Look, I mean, that right there, both in terms of what these guys could still do, these are veteran players who knew how to win, who were great locker room guys, great team guys, who could kind of take a lot off of the plate of Kyler Murray in terms of from a leadership standpoint and allow him to really just focus on the playing of the game. You can't argue with what Steve Keim did. You just can't.
Yeah, Lou, the personnel moves were aimed at bringing in leadership voices to allow Kyler Murray to kind of just go play football and grow into being that vocal leader or whatever style of leadership that he was going to employ. Naturally, right? My issue with the Cardinals is that they publicly demeaned Kyler Murray to the masses, right, for the world to see. And if you're telling me you don't want to trade this guy, you don't want to pay him yet, do you think that tearing him down publicly, discrediting him in his own locker room is going to make the relationship move forward amicably? I don't think it is. So if I'm Kyler Murray, I'm upset about that. And the way I look at this is, yes, there are some dirty tactics that happen when you get into these contract negotiations with players and teams. But if this is your quarterback of the future, why would you go about doing it that way? And I'm more than sure Kyler Murray didn't feel all cozy inside after it all went down. But even so, Kyler Murray's a big boy. He's got to handle his business like a professional, but let's not be up here and make excuses for the bad types of business that are going on in the NFL. It's just not right.
Yeah, I think, Robert, obviously what you're talking about is just managing relationships and keeping things in-house that need to be kept in-house, because you know that you're dealing with highly combustible players that have giant egos, and that's okay. They're supposed to. They're allowed to, especially when you're talking about franchise-caliber quarterbacks. There's no reason to leak information to anyone in any way, shape, or form concerning a guy's level of maturity and or whether or not you feel as though someone could make improvements in certain areas that would help push your team over the top. Communicate that to the player. Communicate that to the rest of the people in the football organization, in the football operation. Communicate that to the head coach. See if he's doing everything he can to extract everything from the player. Don't communicate that to us. Because when you start giving that stuff to us, we have an obligation to go ahead and really go ahead and report that kind of thing. And you know that is not going to help you reach the end goal, which is to get this young man under contract and get him playing at a high level. That's a mistake, no question about it.
Exactly, and it's not like it's abnormal for young guys to not come in and be the most vocal guys early on in their careers. I was in Baltimore for 3 seasons, and Lamar Jackson just wasn't a vocal guy. He led the team by the way that he played. He wasn't in there giving rah-rah speeches or breaking down the huddle, but by the time I left there at the end of those 3 years, he was starting to do more of those things, and he grew into that. You also can look at a guy like Tom Brady, the greatest to ever play the game. He wasn't a vocal leader when he first came into the league. It was Teddy Bruschi, it was Rodney Harrison. These guys were out there leading that defense, and Brady was allowed to grow into that role of being the vocal guy who's super demanding and throwing stuff on the sidelines when things aren't going great. We got to give Kyler Murray an opportunity to grow into whatever type of leader he's going to become.
You know, I do want to pour a little bit of water on this and not to take some of the drama out of it, because that's no fun. But this, I will say, it did go sideways earlier this offseason, but it at least feels like things, aside from comments from Patrick Peterson there or the conversations that are happening outside the building, look, Kyler Murray not showing up for voluntary workouts is not that big of a deal. It's no bigger of a deal than, honestly, Aaron Rodgers doing the exact same in Green Bay at this point. So I don't think we should overstate that. That's just a guy being smart and safe with his body before he gets the long-term deal. Meanwhile, the Cardinals also, I've talked to Steve Keim, the general manager, about this. He's made very clear, we want to get this deal done, and we believe we will get this deal done. It just takes time. These are nuanced, complicated contracts for franchise quarterbacks. Generally speaking, contracts like this don't get done until the middle of summer. If we look at the big names that have signed those deals, it happens mid-summer. I would anticipate after the draft, it will start to gear back up. And eventually, those conversations will happen. For right now, I know it might not feel like it, but things are not in a dramatic or problematic state.
Yeah, Jeff, to your point, the next quarterback negotiation, that's a simple one, will be the first one. It's just the way it works with quarterbacks and teams negotiating big money deals.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.